The betrayal. Humanity had finally found its place among the stars. After centuries of war, struggle, and near extinction, we had overcome our violent tendencies and established ourselves as a respected, if somewhat feared, species in the galactic concord. Our military prowess made older species wary, but it was our medical expertise that truly set us apart. The human body's remarkable ability to adapt to trauma had pushed our medical science far beyond what other species had achieved. The Galactic Concord had initially restricted human expansion, citing our unpredictable nature and inherent aggression. But when the sickness plague erupted across 17 worlds, it was human doctors who developed the cure. When the atmospheric collapse on New Titan threatened to kill millions, human environmental engineers stabilized it in weeks. And when the Krith-Vorn conflict threatened to engulf half the sector, human peacekeepers brokered a lasting treaty. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the USC Mercy, the flagship of Earth's humanitarian fleet. Unlike the sleek warships that made up the bulk of humanity's space force, the Mercy was a massive hospital ship, its hull emblazoned with the ancient symbol of the Red Cross, recognized across known space as a sign of neutrality and aid. Status report on the Varaxian relief mission, she asked her XO. Commander Takashi consulted his tablet. Medical teams deployed to all 12 primary outposts as requested. The Varaxians have been cooperative, if not exactly grateful. Vasquez nodded. The Varaxian hegemony had reluctantly requested aid after a series of devastating solar flares had caused widespread radiation poisoning across their colonial worlds. They were proud warriors. Their exoskeletal bodies evolved for combat, their society built on conquest. Accepting help from humans, a species they considered soft and unworthy, clearly rankled them. They don't have to like us, Vasquez replied. They just have to let us help them. The emergency channel crackled to life. The face of Dr. Sarah Chen, head of the largest medical mission on Vorax Prime, appeared on screen. Her expression made Vasquez's blood run cold. Admiral, they're attacking. The Varaxians. They're killing everyone. The hospitals. Gunfire erupted behind her. Chen ducked as something exploded. The camera jolted, revealing chaos. Human medical personnel in white coats running, falling, dying. Varaxian soldiers methodically executing doctors, nurses, and patients alike. We're under the protection of the Concord. We're neutral. Chen never finished. A Varaxian officer stepped into frame, his chidness face expressionless as he raised a weapon to her head. The feed cut. Similar reports flooded in from all deployed medical stations. The attacks were coordinated, simultaneous. No warnings, no demands, just slaughter. The bridge of the Mercy fell silent. Vasquez gripped the command console, her knuckles white. "Get me Earth Command," she said finally, her voice steel. Within hours, the full scale of the betrayal became clear. Every single human medical outpost in Varaxian space had been attacked. Of the 24,000 personnel deployed, fewer than 300 had managed to escape. Some had been executed outright. Others had been taken prisoner, their fates unknown but grimly imagined. The Galactic Concord convened an emergency session. The Varaxian ambassador didn't deny the attacks but instead presented a chilling justification. Humans were using medical aid as a cover to study our physiologies for future military advantage. Their doctors were gathering intelligence, weakening our populations with treatments that would make us vulnerable to Earth's eventual invasion. It was a lie so transparent that even species hostile to humans dismissed it. But the Varaxians didn't care. They had made their choice. Earth's response was immediate but measured. Diplomatic channels were engaged. Sanctions were proposed. The Concord's peacekeeping forces were mobilized. But in a secure chamber deep beneath Geneva, Earth's Security Council met to discuss options that would never appear in any official record. General Ibrahim Hassan, his face grave, addressed the assembled leaders. The diplomatic response continues, but we must be realistic. The Varaxians executed our people while they were administering aid. This cannot go unanswered. Our conventional military response is prepared, said the Chinese representative. We can have 3 battle groups in Varaxian space within 72 hours. The Varaxians have anticipated a conventional response, replied the Russian delegate. Their entire civilization is built for war. A direct conflict would cost millions of lives on both sides. President Alvarez of the North American Union leaned forward. There is another option. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant. No, said the EU secretary. We agreed after the Proxima incident that we would never use them again. Not under any circumstances. They killed our doctors while they were saving lives, Alvarez said quietly. 24,000 unarmed humanitarian workers murdered while performing acts of mercy. If there was ever a justification, this is it. Hassan cleared his throat. The assets remain viable. They could be deployed within 36 hours. And what happens after? Asked the African Union representative. If we unleash them, can we contain them again? No one answered immediately. The question wasn't hypothetical. We're not talking about weapons, President Alvarez said finally. We're talking about people. Dangerous people, yes, but still human beings who once served Earth. They'll understand the mission parameters. One by one, the council members gave their reluctant assent. The vote was recorded nowhere, the decision locked behind layers of the highest classification. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in a facility unmarked on any map, a klaxon sounded for the first time in 11 years. In sealed chambers, 300 of the most dangerous humans ever born woke from induced stasis. They were called the Condemned, men and women whose skills at dealing death had proven too extreme, even for Earth's military. Some were special forces operatives who had broken under pressure. Others were brilliant strategists whose tactics violated too many ethical boundaries. A few were genuine sociopaths whose abilities were too valuable to waste with execution, but too dangerous to allow freedom. Now they would be unleashed again. Colonel Marcus Drake, former commander of the Ghost Division and architect of the New Jakarta massacre, opened his eyes as the stasis field dissipated. A medical officer stood nearby, watching warily. How long? Drake asked, his voice rough from disuse. 11 years, 3 months, the officer replied. Drake nodded, processing this. And why wake us now? The officer handed him a tablet with the briefing. Drake read in silence, his expression unchanging as he absorbed the details of the Varaxian betrayal. When he finished, he looked up. They killed our doctors, he said flatly. Yes. Drake nodded again, a small smile forming. They shouldn't have done that. Throughout the facility, similar scenes played out as the Condemned awakened. Scientists, assassins, tactical specialists, saboteurs, psych warfare experts. The individuals Earth had locked away because their methods crossed lines that civilization dared not cross. Now those lines would be crossed again. The Varaxians had attacked human medics, believing humans too soft, too constrained by morality to respond with appropriate force. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. The Ari Tribution. The Varaxian High Command expected a conventional human response. They had positioned defensive fleets at all major approach vectors, reinforced planetary shields, and placed their ground forces on high alert. Their military intelligence anticipated a massive retaliatory strike. Carriers, dreadnoughts, and marine landing craft surging toward their territory in righteous fury. What they didn't expect was silence. 3 days after the massacre, with diplomatic channels frozen and military tensions at their peak, High Commander Varric of the Varaxian Defense Force received reports of something peculiar. 3 outlying monitoring stations had gone dark simultaneously. No distress signals, no indications of attack. Simply offline. Technical malfunction, his second-in-command suggested. Those outposts were scheduled for upgraded communication arrays. Varric would have agreed, except for one detail. The stations were separated by millions of kilometers in a perfect equilateral triangle around Varaxian Prime. The statistical impossibility of simultaneous failure troubled him. 20 hours later, he had far greater concerns. The governor of Kalash Colony, their most productive mining world, failed to make his scheduled report. When contact was attempted, only emergency power systems responded. The orbital scans showed no damage, no signs of battle, but also no life signs. An entire colony of 15,000 Varaxians, simply gone. The first images from the ground team would haunt Varric for the remainder of his short life. Bodies arranged in concentric circles around the colony's central plaza. No signs of struggle. No wounds. They appeared to have simply lain down and died. The only evidence of what had happened was a single message, written in perfect Varaxian script on the governor's chamber wall. They came to heal. You chose to kill. Now learn the difference. As panic began to spread through the hegemony's leadership, similar reports flooded in from across Varaxian space. Critical infrastructure failing. Key military personnel disappearing. Supply ships vanishing without trace. And always the same pattern. No warnings, no demands, no witnesses. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were conducting an execution. Marcus Drake stood in the shadows of a Varaxian military facility on Ordis II, watching as Lieutenant Maya Chen, no relation to the murdered doctor, though the coincidence pleased him, finished placing the last neural disruptor. The device, no larger than a credit chip, would release a precisely calibrated frequency that targeted the specialized ganglia controlling Varaxian exoskeletons. Time, Drake whispered. 4 minutes to synchronization. Chen replied, her voice emotionless. All 23 targets will activate simultaneously. Drake nodded. Chen had been a neuroscientist before the incident on Europa Station that landed her among the condemned. Her knowledge of xenophysiology had been deemed too dangerous to allow in the civilian sector, but was proving invaluable now. Any resistance at Target 17? Drake asked. Minimal. Petrov's team eliminated the patrol with targeted nerve agents. No alerts triggered. Drake consulted his tactical display. Across the Varaxian hegemony, 98 teams of condemned were executing similar missions, not attacking military targets or population centers that would be expected, defended against. Instead, they were systematically dismantling the fundamental infrastructure of Varaxian society. Water reclamation plants, atmospheric processors, food distribution networks, command and control systems, all failing in ways that appeared to be accidents, system failures, or incompetence. The Varaxians were a species built for direct confrontation. Their military doctrine, their social structures, even their biology was optimized for facing enemies head-on. The concept of an adversary who refused to show themselves, who struck at the foundations rather than the walls, was outside their evolutionary experience. They were already beginning to turn on each other. On the Varaxian Central World, High Commander Varric executed his third intelligence director in as many days. The previous two had failed to identify the human infiltration methods. This one had suggested something unthinkable, that humans might have developed phase-shifting technology that allowed them to move through solid matter. Impossible. Varric had snarled before ordering the execution. But a seed of doubt had been planted. How were the humans doing this? Where were their fleets, their soldiers, their bombardments? The hegemony had prepared for war, but this silent, invisible dismantling was something else entirely. In the war room beneath his fortress, Varric gathered his remaining commanders. Report, he ordered. Water supplies on 17 worlds are compromised, said his resource minister. The purification systems appear functional, but are introducing trace elements that cause disturbing effects. Explain. Paranoia. Hallucinations. In some cases, complete psychotic breaks. 3 garrison commanders have executed their entire staffs, convinced they were human infiltrators. Another commander spoke. Our communication network is degrading. Critical messages are being altered in transit. Orders I never gave are being received by my battle groups. And the prisoners? Varric demanded. What have they revealed? The intelligence officer looked down. Nothing, Commander. The human medical personnel we captured, they've all died. Interrogation failures. Varric's mandibles clicked in irritation. No, sir. Poison capsules embedded beneath the skin, undetectable until activated. They chose death rather than reveal information. Varric slammed his armored fist into the table. They're medics, healers. How are they more disciplined than our warriors? No one answered. The question revealed a cultural blindness the Varaxians couldn't overcome. They had mistaken human compassion for weakness, human restraint for inability. They had believed that a species that devoted so much energy to saving lives would be incapable of taking them efficiently. It was their final mistake. On the 15th day after the massacre, the condemned shifted tactics. The silent infrastructure sabotage had served its purpose, creating confusion, sowing distrust, stretching Varaxian forces thin. Now the psychological phase began. Varaxian military commanders began receiving personal messages, information about their private lives, their families, their secret fears, sometimes delivered electronically, sometimes whispered through ventilation systems, sometimes written in their own quarters while they slept. We can reach you anywhere, the messages said. We could have killed you in your sleep. Remember this when the time comes. The effect was devastating. Suicide rates among Varaxian leadership skyrocketed. Some fled their posts. Others executed subordinates randomly, hoping to eliminate human infiltrators. The command structure imploded. And yet still no massive human fleets appeared. No armies landed. The Galactic Concord, paralyzed by the unprecedented situation, issued statements of concern but took no action. Other species watched in horrified fascination as the mighty Varaxian hegemony tore itself apart from within. 3 weeks, said Maya Chen as she and Drake observed the chaos from their hidden base on Varaxian Prime itself. We've accomplished in 3 weeks what conventional warfare couldn't have done in years. Drake nodded, studying the reports from other condemned teams. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. Prepare the delivery systems. Chen hesitated. The bioweapon crosses the line we agreed on. These aren't targeted strikes anymore. Drake turned to her, his expression cold. They crossed the line when they executed doctors who were saving their children. Every Varaxian adult knew about the massacre. None protested. There are no innocents. Chen said nothing more, but her eyes reflected doubt. Even among the condemned, there were boundaries. The question was whether they still mattered. In the end, Drake modified the plan. The bioweapon, designed to attack the resin-binding Varaxian exoskeletons, was deployed only against military installations, not civilian centers. It wasn't mercy. It was calculation. The condemned needed the Varaxians broken, not extinct. Extinction wouldn't send the right message to the rest of the galaxy. The Varaxian military collapsed within days. Warriors found their protective exoskeletons softening, cracking, failing. Their biological advantage became a death sentence. Planetary defenses went unmanned. Ships drifted in orbit, their crews incapacitated. Only then, with the hegemony's military power effectively neutralized, did the human fleets finally appear. Not with weapons charged, but with the Red Cross emblazoned on their hulls. Hospital ships, rescue vessels, aid crafts. The same ships the Varaxians had attacked a month earlier now returned, offering help to a civilization they had systematically dismantled. It was the final psychological blow, and the most devastating message to the rest of the galaxy. Humans would meet betrayal with overwhelming force, but they would not abandon their fundamental principles. Even in retribution, they brought healing. For the condemned, watching from the shadows, it was a bitter confirmation of why they could never rejoin human society. They had done what was necessary, what conventional forces could not. But the mercy that followed was a reminder of the line they had crossed long ago, the line that separated necessary violence from cruelty, justice from vengeance. As Marcus Drake watched the hospital ships descend, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Doubt. Had they gone too far? Or not far enough? The question would haunt him during the long journey back to his prison beneath Luna's surface. The Varaxians had targeted human healers. In response, humanity had unleashed its darkest weapons. And then, in the aftermath, sent its healers once again. The galaxy would not soon forget the lesson. The Rishikeoning. 6 months after the fall of the Varaxian hegemony, the Galactic Concord convened a special tribunal. Representatives from 17 species gathered to determine the future of Varaxian civilization and to address the unprecedented methods Earth had employed in its retribution. The Great Chamber fell silent as Admiral Elena Vasquez took the stand. She had commanded the relief efforts after the Varaxian collapse, her hospital ships saving millions who would have otherwise perished in the aftermath of the Condemns campaign. "Admiral," began the Phaeton Arbiter, his translucent tentacles rippling with diplomatic bioluminescence, "Earth has refused to provide details about the operatives who conducted what you term precision response measures against the Varaxian hegemony. The Concord requires transparency." Vasquez's expression remained neutral. "The operational details remain classified for security reasons. However, I can confirm that all actions taken were approved by Earth's Unified Command and conducted by specialized personnel under strict ethical guidelines." The chamber erupted in objections. The Tellurian representative, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns of distress, spoke above the din. "Ethical guidelines. Your operatives systematically destroyed an entire civilization from within. They deployed biological agents against a sentient species." "Targeted biological agents," Vasquez corrected, "designed specifically to temporarily incapacitate military personnel while sparing civilians. Compare our casualty figures to what a conventional war would have produced. The Varaxian military lost 8.4% of its personnel. Civilian casualties were under 0.3%. She let the numbers sink in. Everyone in the chamber understood what conventional warfare between humans and Varaxians would have meant. Billions dead on both sides, planets rendered uninhabitable, economic collapse across the sector. The methods were unconventional, Vasquez acknowledged, but the restraint was absolute. They killed our doctors. We could have killed their species. We chose another path. In the observation gallery, Marcus Drake watched the proceedings with detached interest. After returning to Earth, he and the other condemned had expected immediate return to stasis. Instead, they had been held in a medical facility, undergoing extensive evaluation. Beside him sat Dr. Elara Jones, the psychiatric specialist assigned to assess his mental state. "What do you think of the tribunal?" she asked. Drake considered the question. "They're afraid," he said finally. "Not of what we did, but of what we chose not to do." Jones nodded. "Explain." "We had the capacity to exterminate the Varaxians. Every alien species in that chamber knows it. But we stopped. That kind of restraint is more terrifying than genocide. It suggests a moral calculus they don't understand." "And do you understand it?" she asked. Drake turned to her. "I understand it. I just don't share it. That's why I'm going back in the box, isn't it?" Jones said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. In the chamber below, the tribunal had moved to its next witness, High Commander Varric, one of the few surviving Varaxian leaders. Unlike the proud warrior who had ordered the massacre of human medical personnel, Varric now appeared diminished. His once gleaming exoskeleton was dull and patched, held together with synthetic resins. "Explain to the tribunal," the arbiter demanded, "why the hegemony authorized attacks on neutral medical facilities in violation of all Concord protocols." Varric's mandibles clicked in agitation before he spoke. The decision was based on intelligence that proved incorrect. "Elaborate." "Our deep cultural analysis of humans indicated a fundamental weakness. They expend enormous resources preserving life, even unproductive life. They maintain individuals with genetic defects. the elderly, the incurably ill. By our evolutionary standards, this represents maladaptive behavior. The chamber was utterly silent now. We concluded that a species so devoted to saving lives would be psychologically incapable of efficient killing. Their medical personnel represented the apex of this weakness. By eliminating them, we expected to demoralize and paralyze human response capability. The Arbiter's bioluminescence pulsed with barely contained rage. You massacred healers because you believed their existence made humans weak. It was a miscalculation, Varric admitted. We failed to understand that human medical knowledge flows directly from their understanding of how to damage bodies. Their healers know precisely where life is most fragile. When humans chose to unleash their killers, this knowledge proved devastating. In the gallery, Drake turned to Dr. Jones. He still doesn't understand, he said softly. The Varaxians think we compartmentalize. Healers heal, killers kill. They don't grasp that every human contains both capacities. Jones studied him, including you. Drake met her gaze, especially me. That's the real reason I'm dangerous. Not because I can kill efficiently, but because I understand exactly what I'm destroying when I do. The tribunal continued for 17 days. Evidence was presented, testimonies recorded, judgments rendered. The Varaxian civilization was placed under Concord Protectorate status for 50 years. Their military was disbanded, their colonies restricted, their government reformed under oversight. Earth faced sanctions as well, formal censure for employing methods contrary to Concord ethical standards, restrictions on certain technological developments, mandatory inspections of military facilities. But the sanctions were largely symbolic. No species was eager to enforce punitive measures against a civilization that had just demonstrated such controlled, devastating power. The final day of the tribunal brought an unexpected announcement. Admiral Vasquez addressed the chamber with a proposal that had been secretly negotiated among key Concord members. Earth recognizes that our response, while justified, has raised legitimate concerns about unconventional warfare methods, she began. Therefore, we propose the establishment of a new Concord division, the Emergency Medical and Security Response Force. The proposal detailed a new type of rapid deployment team, combining the best of human medical expertise with carefully selected security personnel. These teams would respond to crises throughout Concord space, providing both humanitarian aid and protection for that aid. Never again should medical personnel be targeted, Vasquez concluded. And never again should any species believe that compassion equals weakness. The measure passed unanimously. Deep beneath Luna's surface, preparations were underway to return the condemned to stasis. Drake sat in his cell, reviewing the psychiatric evaluation that would determine his fate. Dr. Jones entered, tablet in hand. "The board has made its decision," she said. Drake nodded. He had expected this moment since their return from Varaxian space. The condemned were too dangerous to release, too valuable to eliminate. Stasis was the only option. "You're being offered an alternative," Jones said, surprising him. "A position with the new response force. Not freedom. You'd be under constant monitoring, with neural limiters restricting your capacity for unauthorized violence. But not stasis either." Drake stared at her, genuinely shocked for the first time in decades. Why would they offer this? Because what happened with the Varaxians revealed something important. The line between healer and killer isn't as clear as we pretend. Sometimes, protecting requires harming. The new teams need people who understand both sides of that equation. And you think I qualify? After everything I've done? Jones met his gaze steadily. "I think you understand the cost of violence better than anyone. That makes you valuable, if you can channel that understanding toward protection rather than retribution." Drake considered this. The offer wasn't freedom, but it was purpose, a chance to use his skills within boundaries, to protect the healers rather than avenge them. "How many of us are being offered this option?" he asked. 17, Jones replied. "Those whose psychological profiles suggest capacity for reintegration. The rest will return to stasis, with regular evaluations for potential future transitions. Drake was silent for a long moment. The Varaxians targeted our healers because they thought it made us vulnerable, he said finally. Instead, it revealed that our capacity for healing and harm come from the same source, our understanding of life's value. Jones nodded. And now? Drake stood. Now we make sure the galaxy never forgets that lesson. 1 year later, on a remote mining colony at the edge of Concord space, a virulent pathogen broke out among the workers. As life support systems failed and local medical facilities were overwhelmed, a ship appeared in orbit, gleaming white with Red Cross emblems. Medical teams deployed immediately, bringing advanced treatments and hope. And with them came security personnel, quiet, watchful individuals whose presence deterred any who might consider taking advantage of the crisis. Among them was Marcus Drake, his skills now turned to protection rather than retribution. The miners didn't know who he was or what he had done. They saw only another human, part of the team that had come to save them. As Drake secured the perimeter of the field hospital, he caught sight of a young doctor treating an injured child. For a moment, he remembered Dr. Chen, whose execution had helped trigger Earth's devastating response. The doctor here was saving lives as Chen had tried to do. The difference was that now, no one would dare harm her. Not with Drake and others like him standing guard. Not with the memory of what had happened to the Varaxians still fresh in the galaxy's consciousness. Humanity had always walked a line between compassion and violence, between healing and harm. The Varaxians had mistaken this duality for weakness. Their civilization had paid the price. And now, as Earth's medical ships appeared across the stars, everyone understood the message they carried. These healers come in peace, but harm them, and you harm all humanity. The consequences of that choice no longer needed to be explained. They had been demonstrated once. The galaxy would not require a second lesson.